you ever had a moment that changed your entire perspective on life? A moment so unexpected, so profound, that it made you question everything you thought you knew about coincidence and fate. Today, I'm going to share a story that will stay with you long after this video ends. It's about a struggling waitress, a lonely old man, and a credit card that revealed something impossible. Before we dive in, if you enjoy real-life stories that restore your faith in humanity, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Before we begin the story, comment below where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. Please, subscribe to my channel for more sweet videos like this. Let the story continue. This is the story of Sarah Mitchell and the day that changed everything. It was a cold Tuesday morning in November 2023 in the small town of Millbrook, Pennsylvania. The kind of morning where your breath forms clouds and the world seems wrapped in gray. Sarah Mitchell was 28 years old, but if you asked her, she'd say she felt about twice that age. Life had been relentless in its cruelty, throwing one challenge after another her way. She stood in front of the foggy bathroom mirror of her tiny studio apartment, pulling her dark hair into a ponytail. The circles under her eyes told the story of another sleepless night. Her daughter, Emma, just 5 years old, was still asleep in the bed they shared, curled up under the only warm blanket they owned. Sarah had been working at Rosie's Diner for 3 years. It wasn't glamorous. The pay was minimal. The hours were brutal, and some customers treated her like she was invisible. But it was all she had. You see, Sarah's story wasn't unusual. She'd gotten pregnant at 23. Fresh out of community college with big dreams of becoming a teacher. But life had other plans. Emma's father, Marcus, had seemed like the love of her life. He'd promised her the world. But when she told him she was pregnant, everything changed. Within a month, he was gone. No forwarding address, no child support, no explanation. Just gone. Sarah had tried to make it work. She really had. She'd applied for teaching positions, but without a completed degree, she couldn't compete. Bills piled up. Her parents had passed away years earlier in a car accident, and she had no siblings, no family to fall back on. It was just her and Emma against the world. The diner job barely covered rent, utilities, and food. There was nothing left for luxuries like new clothes, or toys for Emma, or even a decent winter coat. Sarah wore the same 3 outfits on rotation, washing them in the sink at night. But here's what made Sarah special. Despite everything, she never lost her kindness. Every customer who walked through those diner doors received the same warm smile, the same genuine care. She remembered regulars' orders, asked about their families, and treated everyone with dignity. Her co-worker, Janet, a veteran waitress in her 60s, often said, "Sarah, honey, you've got a heart too big for this cruel world." But Sarah couldn't help it. It was how her mother had raised her. "Treat people the way you want to be treated," her mother used to say. "You never know what battles they're fighting." That Tuesday morning, as Sarah kissed Emma's forehead and left for her shift, she had no idea that her mother's words were about to come full circle in the most unexpected way. The morning shift at Rosie's Diner started at 6 a.m. By 7:30 a.m., The breakfast rush was in full swing. The smell of bacon grease and coffee filled the air. The sound of silverware clinking against plates created a familiar symphony. Sarah moved between tables with practiced efficiency, balancing plates, refilling coffee cups, taking orders. Her feet ached in her worn-out sneakers, but she kept smiling. That's when the bell above the door chimed. An elderly man walked in, and something about him immediately caught Sarah's attention. He moved slowly, deliberately, using a wooden cane for support. He wore an old military jacket, faded and patched, over a simple flannel shirt. His white hair was neatly combed, and despite his worn appearance, there was a dignity about him. But it was his eyes that struck Sarah. They were sad, deeply, profoundly sad. The diner was packed, every booth filled with the usual morning crowd. Family. Construction workers. Business people grabbing breakfast before work. The noise level was high, everyone wrapped up in their own worlds. The old man stood at the entrance, looking around uncertainly, as if he wasn't sure he belonged there. Sarah watched as several customers glanced at him and looked away. In that moment, she saw something in his face that she recognized. Loneliness. The kind that went bone deep. She immediately walked over, her genuine smile breaking through the morning chaos. "Good morning, sir," she said warmly. "Welcome to Rosie's. Just one today." The old man looked at her, and for a moment, something flickered in those sad eyes. Surprise, maybe, or gratitude that someone had actually acknowledged him. "Yes, just me," he said quietly. His voice was rough, like it wasn't used often. "Perfect. I've got just the spot for you." Sarah led him to a small booth near the window, away from the loudest section. She noticed how slowly he walked, how he gripped the cane tightly. As he settled into the booth with visible effort, Sarah placed a menu in front of him and filled his water glass. "Take your time looking over the menu. Can I start you off with some coffee?" "That would be nice. Black, please." "Coming right up." Sarah returned moments later with a steaming cup of coffee. As she set it down, she noticed the old man staring out the window, lost in thought. "Sir, are you ready to order, or would you like a few more minutes?" He turned to her, and again, that look of surprise. "Oh, yes. Sorry. Could I have the breakfast special? Scrambled eggs, if that's all right." "Absolutely. Toast or biscuits?" "Toast. Wheat, if you have it." "We do. Coming right up." As Sarah turned to leave, the old man spoke again. "Miss," she turned back. "Yes, sir. Thank you. For being kind." Sarah's heart squeezed. "Of course. That's what we're here for." But as she walked away, she thought about those words. "Thank you for being kind," as if kindness was something rare, something unexpected. How long had it been since someone had shown this man simple, human kindness? Over the next hour, Sarah checked on the old man regularly. Each time she refilled his coffee or asked if he needed anything, she noticed small details. His hands shook slightly when he lifted his cup. The military jacket had a name tape that was too faded to read. He ate, slowly, deliberately, like someone who wasn't used to having company during meals. The breakfast rush began to die down. Tables emptied. Sarah had a moment to breathe. She noticed the old man had finished his meal, but hadn't asked for the check. He was just sitting there, nursing his coffee, staring out the window at the November morning. Sarah made a decision. Her manager, Tom, was in the back doing inventory. Janet could cover the few remaining tables. She poured herself a cup of coffee and walked over to the old man's booth. "Mind if I sit for just a minute?" she asked. "My feet are killing me." The old man looked startled, then nodded. "Please, sit." Sarah slid into the opposite side of the booth with a grateful sigh. "Long shift?" he asked. "Always." Sarah laughed. But I'm not complaining. I'm grateful to have a job." She took a sip of her coffee. "I'm Sarah, by the way. Robert," the old man said. "Robert James Henderson. It's nice to meet you, Robert. I haven't seen you here before. Are you new to Millbrook?" Robert shook his head slowly. "No, I'm actually from here, born and raised, but I've been away for a while." "Welcome back then," Sarah said warmly. There was a pause. Then Robert asked, "Do you enjoy this? Waitressing?" Sarah considered the question honestly. "It's hard work, and the pay isn't great, but yeah, I do. I like people. I like making someone's day a little brighter, even if it's just with a good cup of coffee and a smile." Robert studied her face. "You're genuine. That's rare. Life's too short to be anything else," Sarah said. "Ooh." Then, because she felt comfortable with this man, she added, "I actually wanted to be a teacher, but life had other plans. I have a 5-year-old daughter, Emma. She's my whole world. This job lets me give her what she needs." "A daughter," Robert repeated softly. "That's wonderful. Is her father?" "Not in the picture," Sarah said simply, without bitterness. "But that's okay. We're doing fine. We have each other." Robert's expression changed. Something painful crossed his face. "You're lucky," he said quietly. To have that. To have someone. Sarah felt the weight of his loneliness settle over the table like a blanket. "Ooh. Do you have family, Robert?" The old man was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "I did. Once. A long time ago." Sarah waited, sensing he needed to talk. "I had a daughter," Robert continued, staring at his coffee cup. "Rebecca. She was everything. Smart, kind, full of life. She looked just like her mother." "What happened?" Sarah asked gently. "I was in the military, Army. I was deployed overseas for most of Rebecca's childhood. Vietnam, then other places. I kept re-enlisting. Told myself I was serving my country. Told myself it was important." He paused, his hands gripping the coffee cup. "But the truth is, I was running from civilian life, running from the responsibility of being a real father. My wife, Helen, she tried to make me see, but I wouldn't listen. And then," his voice broke, "Shh, Helen got sick. Cancer. Rebecca was only 16. She needed her father. But I was deployed in Germany. By the time they got me home, Helen was gone." Sarah reached across the table instinctively and placed her hand over his. "I'm so sorry, Robert. It gets worse," he said, tears now streaming down his weathered face. "Rebecca never forgave me. She said I chose the Army over her mother. And she was right. She was absolutely right. I'm sure she didn't mean. She did. And she had every right to. Rebecca moved away as soon as she turned 18. Changed her phone number. I've tried to find her over the years. Sent letters to every address I could find, but they all came back. She doesn't want to be found. At least not by me. Robert wiped his eyes with a napkin. That was 32 years ago. I'm 74 now, and I haven't spoken to my daughter in over 3 decades. I don't even know if she's alive. The weight of his confession hung in the air. Sarah felt tears in her own eyes. Here was a man who had lost everything that mattered, and he had no one to blame but himself. The regret was eating him alive. Robert, Sarah said softly, it's never too late. Maybe it is, he interrupted. It's too late. I threw away the most precious thing in my life, and now I'm just a lonely old man waiting to die. Sarah sat with Robert for another 20 minutes. They talked about Millbrook, about how the town had changed over the years, about small things, but the weight of his confession remained. Finally, Janet appeared at the table. Sarah, honey, Tom needs you in the kitchen. Sarah nodded and stood. Need to get back to work. But Robert, please come back, anytime. You don't have to be alone. Robert looked up at her with genuine gratitude. Thank you, Sarah. You've given an old man a bit of hope today. I'll take the check now. I'll bring it right over. Sarah walked to the server station and printed out Robert's bill. His meal came to $12.47. She placed the check in the small black folder and brought it to his table. Here you go. No rush. Robert pulled out a worn leather wallet and extracted a credit card, sliding it into the folder without looking at it. I'll be right back, Sarah said, taking the folder. She walked to the register at the front of the diner. It had been such an emotional conversation. She found herself thinking about Robert's daughter, Rebecca. How could someone just cut off their parent completely? And again, Sarah thought, who was she to judge? She didn't know what Rebecca had gone through. Sarah opened the folder and pulled out the credit card to run it through the machine. She glanced at the name on the card automatically. Then she froze. Her blood ran cold. Her hands started trembling so badly that she almost dropped the card. The name on the credit card read, Robert James Henderson. But that wasn't what made Sarah's world tilt on its axis. Underneath his name, in smaller letters, was the cardholder's previous name in parentheses, a detail from an old joint account that was never updated. It read, Joint account Helen Marie Henderson, Rebecca Ann Henderson. Sarah's vision blurred. Her heart hammered in her chest so hard she thought it might explode. Rebecca Ann Henderson. Rebecca Henderson. That was her mother's name. Sarah's hands shook as she stared at the credit card. Her mother's name. Her mother, who had died in a car accident when Sarah was just 15 years old. Or at least, that's what her grandmother had told her. Her grandmother, who had raised her after her mother died. A grandmother who never, ever talked about Sarah's father. Who would change the subject or get angry whenever Sarah asked. Your father is gone, her grandmother would say. That's all you need to know. Sarah had assumed gone meant dead. But what if it meant something else entirely? Sarah stood frozen at the register, the credit card shaking in her hand. Her mind was racing, connecting dots she'd never even known existed. Her mother's name was Rebecca Ann Henderson. Her mother had never talked about her father. Her grandmother had raised her after her mother's death in a car accident when Sarah was 15. Wait, Sarah's thoughts were spinning. She forced herself to focus, to remember. She'd been told her mother died in a car accident. There'd been a funeral, remembered it vaguely. Through the fog of grief and shock, she'd been 15, drowning in sadness. But she'd never seen her mother's body. Closed casket, her grandmother had said. Too much damage from the accident. And after the funeral, her grandmother had moved them to Millbrook from 2 states away. A fresh start, she'd said. Sarah had been too grief-stricken to question it. He'd just gone along, numb and lost. But now, now she was questioning everything, and it appeared beside her. Sarah, you okay, honey? You look like you've seen a ghost. Sarah couldn't speak. She looked back at Robert's table. He was sitting there peacefully, waiting for her to return with his receipt. The old man who had just told her about his daughter, named Rebecca. The old man whose credit card had her mother's name on it. Janet, Sarah whispered. What year did Rosie's Diner open? Janet looked confused. What? 1987, I think. Why? How long have you worked here? Since 1995. Sarah, what's going on? Sarah ignored the question. Do you remember anyone named Henderson? Robert or Rebecca Henderson? Janet's eyes widened. Henderson? Well, there was a Henderson family that used to come in, way back, before my time, but Rosie used to talk about them. Nice family, military man, I think, and his wife and daughter, but that was ages ago. Early 90s, maybe? Why? Why? Sarah's legs felt weak. She gripped the counter. Ooh. Sarah, you're scaring me. What's wrong? Sarah made a decision. Janet, can you cover my tables for a few minutes? Please. Of course. But Sarah didn't wait for Janet to finish. She grabbed the credit card and walked back to Robert's table on shaky legs. He looked up with a small smile. All set, Mr. Henderson, Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. I need to ask you something. The serious tone made him sit up straighter. Of course. Your daughter, Rebecca. What was her full name? Robert looked confused but answered. Rebecca Ann Henderson. Why? And you said she was 16 when her mother died? Yes, 16. It was 1993, February 14th, Valentine's Day. His voice cracked. Helen died on Valentine's Day. Sarah felt that she couldn't breathe. Mr. Henderson. Robert, did your daughter have any children? Oh, Robert looked very confused. Ooh, I don't know. Like I said, we haven't spoken in 32 years. She could have a whole life I know nothing about. Why are you asking me this? Sarah's hands were shaking so badly she had to set the credit card on the table. Because, she said, her voice breaking, my mother's name was Rebecca Ann Henderson. The color drained from Robert's face. He stared at Sarah like he was seeing a ghost. Ah, he whispered. My mother, Sarah repeated, tears now streaming down her face. Her name was Rebecca Ann Henderson. She died in a car accident when I was 15, in February 1993, February 14th, 1993. Robert's hands went to his chest. Ooh. For a moment, Sarah thought he might be having a heart attack. February 14th, he repeated. No, Rebecca didn't die. Helen died. My wife, Helen, died on February 14th, 1993. Sarah's mind was reeling. And I was told... My grandmother told me my mother died in a car accident. Robert stood up abruptly, nearly knocking over his coffee. Your grandmother, what was her name? Margaret Henderson. Oh, God, Robert gasped. Ellen's mother, Margaret. He gripped the table for support. She blamed me. When Helen died, Margaret blamed me. Said if I'd been home instead of deployed overseas, maybe things would have been different. Maybe Helen would have gotten treatment sooner. The pieces were falling into place, creating a picture that was both horrible and heartbreaking. Margaret must have told Rebecca I was dead, Robert said, his voice hollow. Or told you that Rebecca was dead. She wanted to separate us. To punish me. But why would my grandmother lie to me? Sarah asked, though even as she said it, she knew. She remembered how bitter her grandmother had been. How angry. Always talking about how men couldn't be trusted. How they always let you down. Your grandmother, Robert said slowly, took Rebecca and you away. Made Rebecca believe I'd abandoned her even more than I already had. And then, oh God, if Rebecca really did die later, then she died thinking I never cared, thinking I'd chosen to stay away. Wait, Sarah said. What do you mean if Rebecca really did die? Robert looked at her with dawning horror and hope mixed together. Sarah, he said carefully, how did your mother die? Do you remember? Sarah thought back through the fog of grief. Car accident. That's all I was told. I was 15. Grandmother just said there'd been an accident, and Mom was gone. Did you see her body? No. Closed casket. Were there news reports? Obituary? Sarah tried to remember. I don't know. I was so traumatized I wasn't paying attention. And grandmother moved us away right after. She said we needed a fresh start. Robert sat back down heavily. Sarah, what if Margaret lied about that too? What if Rebecca is still alive? Sarah's heart stopped. That's impossible. Why would she lie about that? But even as she said it, she realized it wasn't impossible at all. Her grandmother had been controlling, manipulative. She'd kept Sarah isolated, homeschooled her, limited her contact with the outside world. Sarah had thought it was just her grandmother's way of protecting her after her mother's death. But what if it was something else entirely? When did your grandmother die? Robert asked urgently. 5 years ago, right after my daughter Emma was born. Do you have any documentation? Your mother's death certificate? I don't know. Grandmother handled all that. After she died, there were just a few boxes of papers. I never really went through them. They're in storage. Robert's eyes were intense. Sarah, we need to find out the truth. If there's even a chance that Rebecca is alive. If you're my granddaughter. The word hung in the air between them. Granddaughter. Sarah looked at this man, this stranger who suddenly might be her grandfather. She saw the desperation in his eyes, the hope mixed with fear. I have to know, she whispered. I get off work at 2 p.m., Sarah said, making a decision. Can you meet me at the Millbrook Public Library? They have computers we can use to search records. I'll be there. Robert said immediately. Sarah ran Robert's credit card, her hands still shaking. She gave him his receipt. "Thank you," he said, gripping her hand for a moment. "Thank you for telling me. I don't know if this is real," Sarah said. "I don't know what we're going to find. Neither do I. But for the first time in 32 years, I have hope." The next few hours of Sarah's shift were a blur. She went through the motions mechanically, but her mind was elsewhere. Could her mother really be alive? Had her entire understanding of her life been built on lies? Ooh. At 2 p.m. sharp, Sarah clocked out and practically ran to the library 3 blocks away. Robert was already there, sitting at one of the computer terminals. Sarah sat down next to him. "Okay, let's start with death certificates, Pennsylvania public records." They searched for Rebecca Ann Henderson, died February 1993, Pennsylvania. Nothing came up. They tried variations. Different spellings, different dates around that time. Nothing. "Let's try obituaries," Sarah suggested. Her hands were sweating. They searched newspaper archives from February 1993. They found Helen Henderson's obituary, Sarah's grandmother's daughter. Her supposed grandmother's... Wait, if Helen was her grandmother and Rebecca was her mother, then Margaret was her great-grandmother? But there was no obituary for Rebecca Henderson. "About your mother's social security number?" Robert asked. "If she's alive, there would be records. I don't know it. But..." Sarah pulled out her phone. "I have my own social security card. If I could find my birth certificate, it might have her number on it." Sarah thought frantically. Those boxes. In storage. My grandmother's papers. I have to go through them. "Where's the storage unit?" "About 20 minutes from here." "Then let's go." They drove in Sarah's beat-up Honda, the tension in the car palpable. Sarah's mind was spinning with possibilities. What if her mother was alive? Where would she be? Why hadn't she tried to find Sarah? Unless her mother thought Sarah was dead too. Oh God. What if Margaret had told Rebecca that Sarah died? What if they'd both been living all these years thinking the other one was dead? They reached the storage facility. Sarah led Robert to a small unit on the ground floor. She unlocked it and pulled up the rolling door. Inside were a dozen boxes, some furniture, and various items from her grandmother's house. "Help me find the boxes labeled documents or papers," Sarah said. They found 3 boxes. Sarah ripped open the first one. Old bills. Tax returns. Nothing useful. The second box was full of photographs. Sarah's heart clenched seeing pictures of herself as a child, pictures of her grandmother. But there were almost no pictures of her mother. It was like Margaret had erased Rebecca from existence. The third box was what they needed. Manila folders filled with documents, Sarah's birth certificate, school records, medical records. And then, at the bottom of the box, a smaller box, walked. "Do you have the key?" Robert asked. "No, but..." Sarah picked up a screwdriver from a toolkit in the corner. She wedged it under the lock and pried. The cheap lock broke easily. Inside the box were more documents and letters. Dozens of letters. Sarah picked up one envelope. It was addressed to Margaret Henderson from Robert J. Henderson, dated 1994. It had been opened. "You sent these," Sarah whispered. I sent letters for years, Robert said quietly, begging for information about Rebecca, begging to see her. Margaret never responded. Sarah opened another envelope. This one was addressed to Margaret Henderson from someone named Rebecca Mills. Henderson. With shaking hands, Sarah unfolded the letter. It was dated 2002. Mother, it read, I'm writing one more time to ask you to tell me where Sarah is. It's been 7 years since you took her. She's my daughter. I have a right to know she's okay. Please, I'm begging you. At least tell me if she's alive and safe. I've changed my life. I'm sober now. I have a good job. I can provide for her. Please give me a chance. Please let me see my daughter, Rebecca. Sarah's hands went numb. The letter fell from her fingers. She's alive, Sarah whispered. My mother is alive. Robert picked up the letter and read it, tears streaming down his face. She's alive. My Rebecca is alive. They found more letters in the box. All from Rebecca. All begging to see Sarah. All unanswered. At the bottom of the box, they found what they were looking for. A current address. Ew. A birthday card sent just 2 months ago. Returned to sender because Margaret had already died. But the return address was there. Rebecca Mills, 427 Oakwood Drive, Harrisburg, PA. That's only an hour from here, Sarah said, her voice breaking. Robert looked at her. What do you want to do? Sarah looked at this man, her grandfather, man who had made terrible mistakes, but had spent decades trying to make amends. A man who had lost his daughter because of his choices and her great-grandmother's manipulation. I want to go see my mother, Sarah said. And I think you should come with me. Are you sure? Yes. It's time. It's time to end this. For all of us. Sarah called the diner and told them she wouldn't be back for her evening shift. Oh! Family emergency, she said. Which was the truth. She called her neighbor, who sometimes watched Emma, and asked if she could keep her a few extra hours. The neighbor agreed. Then, Sarah and Robert got in the car and drove toward Harrisburg. They didn't talk much during the drive. Both were lost in their own thoughts, their own hopes and fears about what they would find. When they pulled up to the address, Sarah's heart was pounding so hard she could barely breathe. It was a modest house in a decent neighborhood. There was a car in the driveway. Someone's home, Robert said. They walked to the front door together. Sarah raised her hand to knock, then hesitated. What if she doesn't want to see me? Sarah asked. Then we'll respect that, Robert said gently. But I don't think that's going to happen. No. Footsteps inside. The door opened. A woman stood there. She was in her 50s, with dark hair streaked with gray, pulled back in a ponytail. She wore jeans and a paint-stained shirt. She looked tired but healthy. She looked exactly like Sarah, just older. The woman's eyes went wide. Her hand flew to her mouth. Sarah? She whispered. Mom? Sarah's voice broke. Rebecca's legs gave out. She sank to her knees right there in the doorway, sobbing. Oh my God. Oh my God. You're alive. You're alive. Sarah dropped to her knees too, and they held each other, crying, years of grief and loss and manipulation pouring out in that embrace. Robert stood behind them, tears streaming down his weathered face, watching his daughter and granddaughter reunite. Finally, Rebecca looked up and saw him. Their eyes met. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Rebecca stood up slowly. She looked at her father, at this man she'd blamed for so much, this man she'd thought had abandoned her. "Dad," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm sorry," Robert said. "I'm so sorry for everything." Rebecca took a step toward him, then another, and then she was in his arms, and he was holding his daughter for the first time in 32 years, and they were both crying. Sarah watched them and felt a piece of her heart that had been broken since she was 15 begin to heal. They spent the next several hours talking, piecing together the truth. Rebecca had explained how Margaret had told her that Sarah had died shortly after Margaret took her away, how she'd tried to fight it, tried to find proof, but Margaret had been clever. She'd moved, changed Sarah's name in school records, cut off all contact. Rebecca had fallen into depression and addiction, destroying herself with grief. It had taken years to get sober, to rebuild her life. But she'd never stopped thinking about Sarah. Never stopped wondering. And Robert told his story. How he'd tried to find Rebecca for decades. How he'd nearly given up hope. "I never stopped loving you," he told Rebecca. "I made terrible choices. I wasn't there when you needed me. But I never stopped loving you." "I know, Dad," Rebecca said, holding his hand. "I know that now." That Tuesday morning, when Sarah went to work at Rosie's diner, she was a single mother barely scraping by, believing her mother was dead and her father unknown. By that evening, she had found both her mother and her grandfather. She had discovered that the grief she'd carried for 13 years was based on lies told by a woman who was too broken by her own pain to see the damage she was causing. Sarah, Rebecca, and Robert all agreed not to waste another moment. Life was too short, too precious. Rebecca moved back to Millbrook within a month. She got to meet her granddaughter Emma, who now had a grandmother and a great-grandfather who spoiled her rotten. Robert, who had been waiting to die, suddenly had a reason to live. He was there for Emma's school plays, her birthday parties, every milestone. Sarah went back to school, supported by her mother and grandfather. She became the teacher she'd always dreamed of being. And it all started because a waitress saw an old man's credit card name, and instead of ignoring the impossible coincidence, she had the courage to ask questions. Some people call it fate, some call it divine intervention. But Sarah knew what it really was. It was her mother's words, spoken to her years ago, coming full circle. Treat people the way you want to be treated. You never know what battles they're fighting. Sarah had shown kindness to a lonely old man, and in return, she got her family back. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe to this channel for more real-life stories that will restore your faith in humanity. And remember, it's never too late. It's never too late to say I'm sorry. It's never too late to try again. And it's never too late for a miracle.